And welcome on in to the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malmut here with you, along with Zach Malmut, who's fresh off a one-quarterback Dynasty rookie draft. Zach, how you doing today? A day after picking up a nice tight end edition, I would say.
Yeah, I'm feeling great, Brett. I obviously wish I could have more drafts because I'm like, okay, well, yesterday was cool. Let's keep the drafts going now. Obviously, we have one this weekend, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, I got Brock Bowers in a one quarterback league. And although I have Mark Andrews at tight end, I have Brock Bowers now. And I feel like my team is in a really, really good spot after yesterday.
Yeah, certainly can't go wrong with Bowers. I mean, the talent is undeniable. We've talked about it at length, and we're going to discuss him a little bit today as we hit the Raiders. As we finish off our division previews, a two-a-days. I guess it's a two-a-week for us. Our second episode this week as we hit the entire West Coast. Did the NFC West today. We are hitting the AFC West. Make sure you go check out all of our episodes on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Give us a thumbs up. Make sure that you check out all of our draft previews that we did, our draft recaps as well. And then obviously these division recaps that we've done, or division previews rather. And then, over the next few weeks, we're going to start to get into draft season. Obviously you had your draft. You just mentioned we have a draft this weekend. And so next week we're going to be breaking down that Superflex rookie draft. Giving the viewers sort of a look behind the curtain of how it actually looks and, where our heads were sort of at those spots, which I think should be pretty interesting. But let's start out here in the AFC West. Training camps obviously are well open, and the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that they have had the biggest highlight, I think, of training camp, and it really comes down to that one pass that we saw Xavier Worthy catch from Patrick Mahomes, and everybody was like, "Oh, well, the Chiefs are back. Here we go." We're going to temper our expectations. I'm expecting there to be a little bit of a boost, at least for Worthy, though, this weekend as we head into that draft. Zach, I mean, they bring in Carson Wentz to be the backup for Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Mahomes coming off a down year. Not too many additions at the running back room. Really, the big addition came at the wide receiver room. Rashee Rice still there, obviously, with the arrest, and we'll figure out what his situation is and whether he gets a suspension or not. But they bring Hollywood Brown. They draft Xavier Worthy as well. The rest of the band is back together. Travis Kelce, obviously. There was rumors he would just sort of ride off into the sunset and, go join the Taylor Swift tour. And he did that, but now he's ready to come back and play some football. So what do you see the pass catchers looking like here? And then what do you see Mahomes' value actually at?
Yeah, Brett, it's quite interesting because I think when you look at those pass catchers, the big question mark is what is going to happen with a guy like Rashee Rice, because obviously all the noise going on off the field, and obviously he's got some things to really work through here. The positive part, you would say, if you're a fantasy owner of Rice, I am in both of my dynasty leagues, so I'm just waiting to see what happens. The positive, you would say, is that the NFL really does a good job of managing situations and seeing how things turn out. They wait till the end of a case before they really figure out a suspension or something like that. And obviously, Rashee Rice, with everything that went on, I'm expecting a suspension once this case is closed. Obviously, like everything that went on, you're pretty sure that something will happen. He'll be suspended however many games. However, we don't know if that'll be this year or next year. That's a big thing. Obviously, Alvin Kamara, we saw last year had that situation and obviously got a suspension in the end to start the season after something that went on the year before. There's a lot of times where the NFL works through that kind of thing. I will say this year, though, Brett, if Rashee Rice is on the field, that's the number one wide receiver, because everything from last year was Rashee Rice at the end of the year got a ton of targets, a ton of receptions, a ton of yards, was a target in the red zone. I mean, he was right there up with Kelsey as the Chiefs' number ones in terms of pass catchers. So I feel like if he is on the field and this situation is going on and is in a bit of a pause, Rashee Rice is the number one guy. I will say, though, if Rashee Rice is off the field, Xavier Worthy gets a massive boost, Brett, because then he'll be the number one. I think it'll take a tiny bit of time to really get Xavier Worthy going. And obviously, based on that video, it's not going to take too much time because these guys are already set to go, Mahomes and Worthy. However, if it all depends on if Rice is on the field, and that will really place where Worthy should be ranked in terms of redraft this year. But right now, he is just a flex play right now, and getting drafted right next to the other rookie wides in the hundreds overall. I mean, 10th round, 11th round, that's the range for those rookies right now. And Worthy's in there because Rice is still on the field. The last guy I'll say is Hollywood Brown, who they also added. And the big thing about Hollywood Brown is he's going to kind of sneak under the radar. He's not going to have those unbelievable games, I don't think, Brett, but he's going to have that solid fantasy value that he's going to still get targets in this offense. He's going to get the ball. He may just be more of a flex play rather than a wide receiver too, which he was in his time in Arizona. So that obviously a loaded wide receiver room. There's a couple more guys there that I don't think really have too much fantasy value. The top three, though, it all depends on Rashee Rice. Off to Travis Kelce. I mean, you could either put him at number 2 or number 1. I'm still going to put him at number 1 in tight end because even as a Laporta owner, yes, I'm biased, but I've only seen it one season. Travis Kelce has had every single season to see as a fantasy tight end and has always been really number 1. Obviously, last year was a down year, so people say, oh, wait, hold on a second. Is Laporta going to be the number 1 tight end? I mean, I'd still put Kelce there, Brett. I think teams can focus more on Laporta this year, as obviously they've seen that offense up in Detroit. I feel like when it comes to Mahomes and Kelce, he's got the best quarterback in football, Travis Kelce does. And it's going to be hard to stop them anyway, even if it is a down year. So I still think Kelce is number 1 on the tight end board. As far as Mahomes, I put him at number 3 right now, Brett, because I do think I'd put him just ahead of Lamar. I understand in fantasy we kind of go either way on it. But yes, it was a down year. This guy is still Patrick Mahomes. And I know that everybody says, oh, well, fantasy quarterback, he's not really there. He has 3 wide receivers now, a star running back, plus a tight end. And I think that's the difference between Patrick Mahomes last year and this year. It was hard to find his wide receivers last year, plus a lot of drops last year. That was the big thing, Brett, if you remember. I mean, every single wide receiver had a drop ball or some mistake of some kind. I still think Patrick Mahomes is a top 3 fantasy quarterback, and I still put him up there. And finally, Isaiah Pacheco. I don't think there's anybody close to him in that backfield. And for that reason, I put him as a top 10 running back. I think he's right there. And then a second-round pick, I'm a big believer that he's just going to go off once again this year. Based on who's behind him, I think he just takes it in a landslide.
Yeah, so a lot to digest there. I think that I'll start with the big picture of Patrick Mahomes. And the question that I proposed last week was, is he going to be the same guy? Will he finish as a top 5 quarterback? I think there is a chance he can finish as the number 1 quarterback just because of the talent, just because you mentioned it. Like, the drops were a huge issue last year. It was really frustrating watching him as a Mahomes owner, where he escape pressure, the line would break down, he'd make some fantastic play, he'd throw it downfield, And then you get a drop from whether it was Kadarius Toney, MVS, like go down the line. Justin Watson, Sky Moore, like these guys were just dropping the ball pretty much. McCall Hardman had a few drops also. And so they bring in this new group to work with some of the old group. Travis Kelce obviously is still a talent, and I don't see the slowdown by any means. I just think it was a down year for the whole offense. And so I think Mahomes still has that value. I'm obviously like going to question whether he's the first quarterback off the board. I don't totally see that unless I'm the one making the pick, because he's still my pick. I think that looking at the quarterback around the league, they all sort of have their own thing about them that's sort of a knock. And when you take a look at the top 5 guys, yeah, Lamar still has the speed, but we still really haven't seen the arm. When you take a look at, Hurts, like they have Saquon in, does that take away the rushing touchdowns? When you look at Josh Allen, they got rid of Stephon Diggs, his number 1 target. Like, what does that look like now with a rookie coming in, Keon Coleman, and then Curtis Samuel and the rest? So they all have their knocks. I think that the Chiefs actually were the one team out of all those top quarterbacks that went and surrounded him a bit more than the other teams, who sort of, it looked like, may have, crippled the fantasy points a bit. And I just say that from the Eagles standpoint, because it's not really that they subtracted, but I think it was subtraction of points by addition with one coming in. It's going to take away a little bit of the rushing ability, I think, from Hurts. And so, yeah, I think that listen, group is just that top group. And if you want one of them, you're going to have to go get one of them. That said, I think Mahomes still is my guy. I'm still rolling with him. And that's sort of just how it is. So that 2-3 turn, like I'm still sort of expecting the Mahomes pick there when I go and I take a quarterback, unless of course somebody grabs him in round 2, and then I'll settle for somebody else. But we'll get to that when we get to that. As far as Kelce goes, yes, I agree with you. I think that he still is the number 1 guy, and it really just comes down to the number 1 target of the best quarterback. And yeah, it was a down year for the whole offense, but at the same time, I think that we saw the guy basically put up running back, wide receiver numbers for years and years, to the point where he was taken in the first round. This is going to be a year where that 2-3 turn, like he'll be there at that 2-3 turn, most likely in many drafts. And so, yeah, very good consideration at that spot. And, honestly, one of the potential targets that I have when we come to that back end of the second turn that I might be looking at. That said, bouncing around over to Isaiah Pacheco, who I think took a big step forward this year. Totally wasn't – I wouldn't say that I was expecting it. I did flip him previous year in Dynasty for a late first, and I was like, okay, well, the same sort of thing happened to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and we'll just see this. This guy is just different. He runs with such energy and such power. I love to watch him run. And so, I'll take it on the chin. My bad. I probably shouldn't have traded him in Dynasty, but from the redraft standpoint, I think that this is a guy that, again, probably is right there in the middle of the second round. Could be a really good duo if you get a really top end wide receiver. Like this could be your number 1 running back. It is one of those guys that is going to get the workload. I don't really foresee Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming into any sort of competition. He'll get his carries when they need a change of pace, but Deneric Prince, like a lot of the Dynasty community, was still in on him. I don't see it. I think that this is Pacheco's job to lose, and unless there's an injury, I don't see any of those other guys making any sort of an impact. And then it's the wide receiver room, which I think is also very interesting. Obviously, yes, we talk about Rashee Rice and the potential suspension and what might happen. Yeah, be patient. So I think it actually helps more in the redraft community that we haven't heard anything than if he was in the Dynasty asset. Dynasty owners, obviously you're sitting and waiting But for now, I think that it kind of downgrades his value a bit. We were seeing him picked in like round 8, round 9. I think that, he probably goes down around now. There's probably other guys that a lot of people would go out and try to take over him. I know that Hollywood Brown was being picked right around there. I could see that being a pick instead of Rashee Rice. That said, Worthy, I think, also is just below them. And the reason is because I think that a lot of teams are going to try to eliminate the Tyreek Hill comparison before it comes true. That dude is fast. And we saw that highlight a week ago. Like, he's really fast. And, we saw it at the combine as well. Like, I think that a lot of teams are going to sit back on Mahomes like they've been over the last couple of years, make him throw it short. I don't know how that affects Worthy's game, where it seems like a lot of what we're going to see is him get down the field really quickly and turn and hopefully get the ball. Listen, if there's a way that Mahomes can get him the ball, Mahomes will do it. And so, yeah, I think it's a good sleeper pick, probably around round 10, round 11. It's just really, I'm really unsure who's going to be the one this year. And so to me, I'm a little skeptical on picking any of them, but they're sort of all right in the same spot. So if you are going to take one, at least you're not, taking him as your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1. I'm probably more likely to take them as my 3rd or 4th receiver, depending on where we are. And if they hit, they hit, and then that's great. But yeah, I don't foresee any of that. And then just lastly, Harrison Butker. Listen, you got to go get him. That dude is a stud. He hits everything from range, and he's going to be a top 5 kicker again. Anytime you can get Patrick Mahomes' kicker on the same team that you have Patrick Mahomes, go do it, because you benefit on the points. Every touchdown becomes an extra point. Every time Mahomes doesn't score the touchdown, you're getting 3 points. And so, I like doing the kicker quarterback combo when I can, just because, listen, it's fun to get rewarded, to get those double points, to stack them up there.
Yeah, 100%, Brett, and obviously rooting for those top caliber offenses is definitely a plus in doing that. I agree with a lot of what you said, and it proves that, I mean, where these Chiefs wide receivers, who most years people are just like worried about them, they're like, I don't know if I trust them. I think this year it's more of, if they could be your 3rd or 4th receiver, like that's okay. Like that's okay. And you can get a really solid roster out of it before them. And all of a sudden, if one of them turns into a real star this year and is the best of the bunch, then you get them a lot later than people really expected.
All right, so let's jump right into what I think is the second biggest question mark team. And it's really just because they're an unknown this year. They obviously go out and get Jim Harbaugh to be their coach. That is the Los Angeles Chargers. Zach, listen, they go out, they got Harbaugh, they bring in Greg Roman, so you know there's going to be a lot of running involved in their offense. Loves to lean into the run. They go out, they get the Gus Bus, and then they go out and they get J.K. Dobbins as well. Draft Kamani Vidal, bring back Isaiah Spiller. And so, expertless in the backfield, but obviously, they bring in a bunch of heads to play alongside Justin Herbert there. And then at the receiver room, they basically overturned the bulk of their receivers, and it was kind of an interesting early offseason for Chargers fans. They get rid of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Mike Williams obviously goes to the New York Jets. Keenan Allen off Caleb Williams' Chicago Bears. And so they go out, they draft Ladd McConkey. Josh Palmer now is the de facto number 2, with Quentin Johnston coming back as well. They bring in DJ Chark. They also draft Jerry Rice's kid, Brendan Rice, which was kind of interesting as well. And then they get rid of their tight end room. They have Hayden Hurst and Donald Parham. So, Zach, I mean, this is a team where we're looking at it, and the leaning into the run is sort of the theme here. What to you, obviously a Justin Herbert Dynasty owner, do you say about A, Dynasty Justin Herbert value? And B, which one's number one here at the receiver room?
Yeah, Brett. I mean, I talked about this one to preview this episode just a couple days ago, and I'm worried as a Herbert owner, especially in Dynasty. I mean, but the thing I'll say to that is, I mean, Justin Herbert was just is a couple years out from being a top 3 quarterback in fantasy football, and you can't tell me that you're already going to give up on Justin Herbert. Like, it's just way too early. I mean, the guy is 26 years old and really, when he's on his game, a top 5 fantasy quarterback. He really is, because the talent that he has in his arm. He's able to run and get out of the pocket when he needs to. He doesn't do it a lot, but he does it when he needs to, and that's important. And I think the big thing is, like, he's had problems in Los Angeles already to start his career. And I had my thoughts on Brandon Staley. That's just how it was. And obviously he's out the door, and they bring Harbaugh in. And the negative to that is, yeah, it's now a fully running offense, run-heavy offense where just smash mouth football. They get a tackle as well, and Joe Alt, and they bring him in. They bring a lot of running backs in, get those blocking tight ends in, and I mean, that's just kind of where we're at. However, one thing I'll say to that is everybody freaks out and says, oh, well, it's all going to be running the ball now. Okay, well, if anybody watched a Michigan game last year, you know that, yeah, they can't always run the ball. Even though if they want to and they can control the line, they do have to pass a fair amount of the time. And, I mean, there's not many better passing quarterbacks than Justin Herbert, Brett. So, for that reason, I'm a little more confident than other Herbert owners who have just completely given up on the year. They're like, nope, it's done. Nothing's going to happen. I disagree with that. And yes, it's a downgrade from the expectation, but if he can be the number 10, 11 quarterback in fantasy football, I mean, you take that any day. I think that's the big thing about Herbert this year. But, I mean, looking at Herbert, yeah, he's ranked in like top 15 range, top 20 range. People have put him in different spots. I'm a little more positive than some other people. Right now, he's ranked 13, just outside the quarterback ones as a quarterback too. And I think that's, yeah, fair enough evaluation heading into this year. The next guys, obviously you got the running back room with Edwards and Dobbins. And it's kind of, they also have Kamani Vidal. Brett, it's kind of a guessing game in my mind. I think Edwards is the lead guy, but I haven't seen J.K. Dobbins play in 3 years. So I don't know if all of a sudden he's got a bolt of energy and he's, no pun intended there with the Chargers, but I think he can all of a sudden step up and be a number 1 running back, J.K. Dobbins. We don't know. We haven't seen him. So I really think it's more of a guessing game of who you want to draft there. And I feel like they're more of running back 4s and flex kind of plays. All right, well, if one of them goes down, you say, all right, I'll grab Edwards and hopefully he falls into the end zone for me and gets a couple touchdowns or something. I think that's kind of the range that we're looking at. I really wouldn't put them too much higher than that. Edwards is going 36th among running backs right now, Brett. So, I mean, for that reason, that's 11th round. So I think for that reason, you're definitely dropping them. As far as the tight ends, I don't really too much see one above the other. Some may say, oh, well, look, Hayden Hurst is the lead guy. Yes, he can be, but they also have Farham there, who is a real target in the red zone. They also added Will Dissly there. And so you'll say, okay, Hurst is the lead guy, but especially in this offense where it's going to be focused on the run game, I think there's better options at tight end, and definitely a tight end heavy year in fantasy football. And lastly, you go to the wide receivers, and this is, yes, also a guessing game. I do think Ladd McConkey is going to get the most targets of anybody in this group. However, will that turn into tons and tons and tons of fantasy points? I'm not sure, because Ladd McConkey is more of a short yardage kind of player. I really think Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer are going to be more of the deep threats in this offense, I would say, especially Quentin Johnston. So yes, we're expecting an up from last year. I don't know how far that will go in this run-heavy offense. I do think, like I said, McConkey will get the most targets of anybody. Quentin Johnston will probably get the most deep shots of anybody in this room. And you also have DJ Chark there with Josh Palmer. So a lot of guys here. I would put McConkey as well as QJ as just late round flyers. I mean, you probably put McConkey with the rookies where they are in the 11th round, but Johnson's kind of right around there just because the trying to build trust in this offense, Brett.
Yeah, I think that for me, at least, when it comes to the receiver room, like Quentin Johnston, it can't go any more down than it was last year. So obviously, it's got to be an up. Josh Palmer looked pretty good last year when he had Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert was looking for him in the games that Keenan Allen wasn't playing. And so he ended up becoming a pretty useful spot for me in my flex role in our Dynasty League. Like, I'm probably going to end up keeping him this year on that roster. When we have our cuts. So after our draft, we cut down to 21 minutes. So he's going to end up being on my team. Plain and simple. I think that he's earned the spot basically. And there's a chance that he has a pretty significant role in his offense this year. So, listen, I think that him versus Quentin Johnston, I think that Josh Palmer actually beats out Quentin Johnston for a bigger role. That said, we saw the quote yesterday from Harbaugh about Quentin Johnston and how he's going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem. I think that's just a coach talking his guy up on day one of camp, basically telling him to go out and earn it through the media. And so, yeah, I think that he'll have a role, but I don't know how significant that'll be. I think that they're very excited about Ladd McConkey coming in as well. And so sort of see this two-headed monster between McConkey and Palmer, Quentin Johnston sort of as that third option there, as that deep threat. And DJ Chark, yeah, you mentioned it. Like, Chark will have some sort of a role. I don't know that it'll be this huge role, but definitely someone to at least monitor the waiver wire for if he falls through the cracks in your league's draft. As far as the receiver room, or the tight end room, rather, I'm staying away from both of them. I don't know that they really hold any value. Then it goes to the running back room, and this is sort of the curious case of who is going to be the number one. I don't think it's any of them. I think this is going to be a full committee. It's going to be full, like, San Francisco 49er before they got McCaffrey, where it was like, all right, we're just going to ride the hot hand. And, if Gus Edwards wants to pound it in for a touchdown, great. We're going to keep using him. If, Dobbins breaks off a big run, great. Take a play off and get back in there. And that's going to be how they go. And so I almost see it as a game-by-game basis. We're seeing a lot of hype in the Dynasty community about Vidal. Listen, there is a chance that he ends up as the one at the end of the year. And Gus Edwards obviously dealt with injuries, and same with J.K. Dobbins. And so, yeah, there's a chance that an injury happens to one or both of them. And then Vidal is there as the guy. We also have Isaiah Spiller. Again, not to keep talking about my own Dynasty team, but it was a guy that I did stash for a while before it kind of just got to be the end of the line. You grow impatient with these guys. I don't know that Spiller really has any sort of role unless one of the two gets injured or both of them get injured with Dobbins and with Edwards. And so, yeah, I think that, listen, Gus Bus is the hot name right now. I think that a lot of people are going to go out and draft him in like round 11 or 12. I think that that's fair value. I think to be able to get a guy who's going to score touchdowns in there, likely he's not going to be one of your top options. He's going to end up sitting on your bench for most of the year. And if he gets hot, then he might hit your flex, And so that's sort of where I see all of these guys going. Dobbins is right there as well. With Gus Edwards, probably right in the same range. That said, I think the biggest value of any of these guys is Justin Herbert, because in redraft, you're getting him pretty much in the last round. Zach, we talked last year about, I think it was Kirk Cousins the last round of our redraft league and just basically tore it up for a couple weeks. And so, there's value there. And then obviously he tore up literally with his Achilles. Sorry, bad pun. But, listen, I think that Herbert being able to take a guy that as your backup quarterback in the last round of a draft, like that's pretty awesome. I don't think that it's going to be this huge uptick in numbers, obviously, but it's still a guy who's finished like top. You said it, top 3, but he's been a top 10 quarterback the entire time he's been in the league, and so they're tagging him outside the top 15, and it is what it is. I just think like it's a good option to be able to fall back on if you don't get a strong quarterback, if value's just sort of there towards the back half of your drafts, you just keep saying Justin Herbert's a good guy to just fall back on and have him as your backup guy in the last round of a draft. And that's sort of where I see the Chargers going. But yeah, very interesting case because it sort of seems like we're just going to see run, play action and dump it off to Palmer or McConkey in space. And that's kind of where I see this going.
Yeah, 100%. And lastly, Brett, with QJ, for those owners who are just so annoyed and say, oh, well, darn, Jim Harbaugh's coming in. I mean, we're 2 years out from Quentin Johnston absolutely wrecking Michigan in a semifinal game against Jim Harbaugh, who knows him very well. So I think those quotes that you talked about, I mean, this is a guy who knows Quentin Johnston and has seen him at his peak level. I mean, I go back to that semifinal game, 6 for 163 and a touchdown, Brett. I mean, if you're a QJ owner, I understand you're unhappy after last year, but there are some positives to Harbaugh coming in to try and help this guy get back to the level that he was in college.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're one of those rebuilding teams, like it's an Ilo candidate, can't go down. He can't go down from where he was. His value is, I think, at its minimum. I don't think that it'll get lower. I think it can only go up.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so let's break down the Las Vegas Raiders, who showed up today with a Patrick Mahomes, Kermit the Frog puppet. They basically make the joke about Patrick Mahomes and that he sounds like Kermit the Frog. So Raiders took it into their own hands, brought the puppet to training camp. We'll see if that comes back to bite them when they face Mahomes when the season starts, because Mahomes loves his bulletin board material. He talked a lot, I remember, on the Netflix documentary about channeling the anger, almost like what Michael Jordan used to do, where he would sort of pick one thing that they may have said about him and use that as fuel. That might be used in the Raider game. But listen, the Raiders defense improved, and now they're kind of improving their offense. They bring in Gardner Minshew to basically be the stopgap quarterback there. Zamir White, he's there, but guess who's not there? Josh Jacobs. They bring in Alexander Madison. Jacobs departs and goes off to Green Bay. They draft Dylan Laub. They obviously have Devontae Adams there, and they have Jacoby Myers there. Trey Tucker's there as well. And then the big fella, they bring in Brock Bowers in what was a pretty shocking pick. Everybody sort of thought that they were going to go Michael Penix. Then obviously Atlanta says, no, thank you. We will take him. And the Raiders are sort of just left with, okay, we'll take the best available, even though we already have Michael Mayer. And so they go out and they take Bowers. Zach, I think that, to me, there's a couple questions that I have. Number one, is Zamir White a legitimate threat? Number two, can Gardner Minshew actually funnel Devontae Adams with fantasy points? And number three, is Michael Mayer's fantasy value gone now that Brock Bowers is here, or they can coexist?
So first question, we'll go with Gardner Minshew and to Devontae Adams, because I feel like that's the biggest thing that people will want to look at in the fantasy world, especially because we haven't seen Devontae Adams at his peak level in a couple years now. Obviously, a down year last year by his standards, but obviously the talent is still there. 100% from Devontae, and the question marks of, is he going to be out the door because of that? I think this year, especially because they grabbed Gardner Minshew and what we saw last year in Indianapolis, Brett. I mean, there's no reason to not be positive if you're a Devontae Adams owner and seeing Minshew maybe be the starter. Obviously, there's still the question there if O'Connell or Minshew will be the starter, I think, Brett. So obviously you're hoping it's Minshew and give O'Connell some time to learn under a veteran quarterback. If it is Minshew, I feel like Devontae's value really is in a good spot. Right now, he's getting drafted as the number 10 wide receiver, just right in the middle of that second round, next to guys like Chris Olave and Michael Pittman. So, I mean, he's right there in that range with those guys. And why not? He's still a wide receiver one in my mind. I do think it depends on the quarterback. And when it comes to our redraft, Brett, I'll obviously wait and see who is the quarterback for Vegas this year, whether it's one or the other. I think I'm pretty positive they're going to put Gardner Minshew, but just to make sure, I feel that Devontae Adams would be a good option, definitely as a wide receiver one, if Minshew's in at quarterback. And right behind Devontae, there are some guys that you maybe take a shot on. There's, of course, Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker. They added Jalen Guyton. None of them, I don't think, are really too much on the fantasy radar because of the addition to Brock Bowers. I feel like Jacoby Myers, you kind of go back and forth each year of, oh, well, maybe can he be solid enough for me? He's in the range of like 13th round. So if you're drafting him as like your last wide receiver on your roster, yeah, all right, fair enough. Take a shot on him, see if it falls, because he is the wide receiver 2 right now in this room. I feel like you got to wait and see though how it turns out. But yeah, he's one of those flyers that because he is just the second wide receiver in this offense, that why not have him on your team? The next one I'll go to is the running backs, and Zamir White. Can he take that huge leap and be a running back one? He's getting drafted right now inside the top 25, Brett. However, I don't know if I believe in it just yet to take him as early as he's going. I mean, he's going in the 6th, 7th round, but that's big range right there of we always say you win your drafts in rounds 4 through 7. You don't win them in round 1. And so there's some guys there that I'd say, maybe I'd take them over a guy like Zamir White, just because I don't know how it's completely going to be. Is it going to be just a full workload for White as the number 1 running back, or is Madison going to get touches there as they bring him in? They also got a rookie there. Like, everything points to, maybe Zamir White can get all those touches, but we never know. And especially in this offense where they have multiple guys that they can really go to. So I'll wait and see on that. And in terms of tight end, Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, the thing I'll say on Michael Mayer, I don't think his value's done just yet. I think that it took a massive hit because they drafted Brock Bowers. But we've seen countless amount of offenses work through tight ends, Brett. And I think that's really what Vegas is focusing on. They wouldn't have drafted Michael Mayer last year and then Brock Bowers this year if they didn't believe in that. I feel like Michael Mayer, you just have to kind of wait and see if you're a dynasty owner, how they really work this offense. In terms of Brock Bowers, he's put in as a tight end 2 right now, and I think that's a good spot for him. Some people have put him higher. I don't see it right away for this year. If it comes to, all right, middle of the season and this offense is rolling like the Colts passing offense was last year, Brett, and everybody's happy, everybody's getting targets, then you say, all right, Brock Bowers could be in the tight end 1 range. But for right now, he's being drafted as a tight end 2, a solid backup option in any league, and I feel like that's just a good spot for him. heading into this year. The talent is definitely there. And I'm very happy to have him on my Dynasty team.
Yeah, it's always good to have a guy like that on your dynasty team. He's just a monster. I think that when the Raiders do figure out their quarterback situation past Gardner Minshew, they're going to keep that guy the focal point in their offense with Devontae. Obviously, we'll see what happens with Devontae, the future, all of that. That's a conversation for another day, but it is something that has been mentioned in the circles in the last couple weeks, and he came out and basically said, "I'm a Raider," and so there's nothing more to that other than he's a Raider for now, and we'll see what happens in the future. Just quickly on the thing, I think that there's going to be a lot of 12 personnel that these guys play where they're going to try to get both of them on the field at the same time. And so there is still a role for Mayer. Obviously, it's not really going to affect redraft. I think he's sort of off the radar for me when it comes to that. Bowers is one of those guys that is going to go later in drafts now because there are two of them there. And so we're talking like, 13th, 14th round even, where you can go out and get a Brock Bowers as your backup 10. Not a bad guy to go out and get. I think that obviously the talent is there. And then from rookie standpoint, like we've been talking about it, he's right there at the top of the draft in the one quarterbacks and then right there towards the bottom and in the super flex leagues. And so, yeah, and listen, the talent is there, plain and simple. As far as the rest of them go, I think it's kind of interesting with the receiver room. Obviously, you got Devontae and whether or not he can get the feed in. I think that watching Gardner Minshew over the last couple of years and how he's sort of been able to open up the eyes of some of these receivers. We saw how Pittman came on last year. Like, I think that sort of helps Devontae Adams, and he's going to be looking for Devontae pretty much every time he goes down the field. That said, I think that, there's a lot of people that are sleeping on Devontae. And so in that same 3-4 turn that I was talking about with Kelsey, like you're going to have Devontae right in there, potentially slept on. And so to be able to grab him at that sort of a spot as a 3-4 turn, like I think that that's a pretty good spot to be able to go get one of the elite wide receivers who might have that competition as far as the target share goes. That said, I think that Jacoby Myers finds himself in an interesting spot too, because we saw a couple boom weeks last year. It's nothing fancy. Obviously, if Devontae goes down, then it's a different story. But he's sort of like that role that they wanted Hunter Renfrow to be, and Jacoby Myers just basically took it from him, where it basically becomes short yardage targets and just get open in the middle of the field. I'm curious if that changes at all now with the two tight ends there, where we didn't really see that in the past. But Myers for me is probably in that like 12th round, 13th round range. Probably right towards the back of your draft, and to be able to get a wide receiver 2 for his specific team at that spot, I think is a good value for him. I'd say Zamir White. To me, I'm very low on Zamir this year. And I think it's really just because a lot of people are very high on him. I think that a lot of people think he's going to be Josh Jacobs and the second coming of Josh Jacobs. We saw like the back half of last year, like he was good. Yeah, he got points, but was he like this workhorse elite back that was just totally going to win everybody every single game for the rest of your fantasy seasons? Like, no, he wasn't a number one running back. He just wasn't. And so, listen, there's a lot of hype on him right now. I think that there's probably better options in that spot. Like, I think of guys like Monty, who obviously, like, people are very low on Monty this year, but he still scores all those goal line touchdowns. And so to be able to get a guy like that there, I'd much rather have him than have like a Zamir White. There's a lot of hype about DeAndre Swift. He's right around there. I'd probably take Swift over Zamir White. And so I'm just being honest. Like I see where people are being very high on him. I'm not one of those people. Just plain and simple. I think that Alexander Mattison will have some sort of role that will eke into Zamir White's value as well. That said, I'm not picking either guy this year. I don't know that picking either guy is smart. People are out there taking Dylan Laub at the back half of their rookie drafts. Okay, shot in the dark. Listen, when you get to that point in your draft, sort of just take the lottery ticket, and if it hits, it hits. And if you have a taxi squad and you can store them on there for amount of time, then yeah, great. Dylan Laub might be a guy, and Zamir White's not the answer. They can get out of his contract and save $1 million at the end of this year. That's something that a lot of people are avoiding when they're basically putting this guy on a pedestal as a top 15, top 20 running back in the league. And so, yeah, I don't really see it. And then as far as quarterback, obviously, Gardner, not on the fantasy radar for me. He's a very low end quarterback too. At the very highest. And so to me, he won't be on my team. Superflex obviously changes things where you sort of have to get multiple quarterbacks, but to me, he's a bench guy in that standpoint.
Yeah, 100% agree on all fronts, Brett. And I'm curious to see, like we said, the big thing about Vegas this year is getting Davante Adams back to the normal numbers that we're used to. And you mentioned right on the 2-3 turn of drafts in 12 and 10 team leagues, Davante is being slept on. So he's going even a little bit lower than that. People are not as high on him, and he's dropping a tiny bit from where he's ranked. And that's a guy, talent wise is clearly all the way up there in terms of wide receiver. So I'm curious to see how Minshew really has that impact on Adams this year.
All right, so let's jump to our final team here in the NFL division previews. And it is the Denver Broncos. And Zach, it has been just an absolute tornado through Denver in the last 2 years with Sean Payton. Obviously, going back and forth with Hackett through the media. Aaron Rodgers gets involved. Then, obviously, the drama with the Russell Wilson conundrum, whether or not they're going to get rid of him or not. They get rid of him, and they bring in Bo Nix. And, Sean Payton basically coming out, and they showed the tape. Listen, he is all in on Bo Nix. And I think that you have to kind of factor in a little bit of reality, like where they were drafting, like who wasn't going to be available to them at those spots. Okay, let's do our extensive work on a guy like a Bo Nix, a guy like a Michael Penix Jr., that sort of range of quarterback, even the guys like Spencer Rattler. And so they go out, they draft Bo Nix. He said it. He was his guy. Right before that, they go out and they trade for Zach Wilson from the New York Jets. And so he's now battling with Jarrett Stidham for the number 2 job, which I think has more dynasty implications than it does redraft. But, we don't know if Bo Nix is going to end up being the starter or if it'll be one of those other 2 guys. Obviously, Javonte comes off a down year, what we would both say is a down year. They go out and they bring in Audric Estime in the draft. Samaje Perine stays, and Jaleel McLaughlin as well. Then you look at the receiver room. They trade Jerry Jeudy off to Cleveland, so they still have Cortland in there. Marvin Mims stays as well. But then they go out and they draft Troy Franklin, who was Bo Nix's college wide receiver. And so interested to see what it'll be there. Josh Reynolds and Tim Patrick are there as well. And Greg Dulcich is there with Adam Troutman as the tight ends. Zach, I think that the big question for me, just with this entire offense, really comes down to your guy, Javonte. What is the value going to be for Javonte? Will he be able to get back to the value that he had? And then if he does, you and I have had this discussion, but we'll have it on air here. Is it the time to sell high then if Javonte has a couple good weeks in the season?
Yeah, 100%, Brett. I feel like the big thing with Javonte is as a dynasty owner, I've just been waiting. I've been waiting for a good week. Give me one. And I feel like this is the kind of year that it could happen. He could have just 2 straight good weeks. And I'm saying, all right, see ya. Drive him to the airport. You're out the door. I feel like that's the kind of situation based on this offense. Because you just named every single one of those guys, Brett. And what it tells you about this offense, what a team to finish off on here on our division previews, because there is just so much questions to be answered, so many of them, so many questions to be answered. And looking at it, like, yeah, there's like the guys at the top in Javonte Williams and Cortland Sutton. But then there's the guys behind them that you're like, oh, well, maybe they could get some targets. Maybe they could get some rushing and maybe some touchdowns. They fall into the end zone. Like, nobody knows, Brett. And I think that's the biggest thing for the Denver Broncos is I don't think they even know. I think they're saying, all right, well, whoever's good, we're going to put them in and let's roll with it. So I feel like Bo Nix is definitely going to end up starting for this team and they'll figure things out. But yeah, if Javonte gets a couple good weeks, Brett, I'm all in on shipping him out. There's really no guy on this team, Brett, that I'm actually targeting in fantasy. Like I'll go through just quickly. I'll go through the running backs because I think that's a big time spot right there where there's so many of them and kind of where you can get them in drafts. Javante's right now going in the 10th round, and you say, oh well, it's pretty good value. Yeah, but it's a big question mark if you're even drafting. Like if you do draft them, like what's going to be the expectation this year as he's to be said the lead running back in Denver, but there's also so many guys behind him in McLaughlin. They drafted Estime. They brought in a bunch of other guys. They got Samaje Perine there too. Like there's so many running backs. You can't even keep up with it. So what's the level that you're putting Javonte at? And yeah, if you draft him in the 10th round, I would say, okay, well, yeah, he's the number one running back. I would wait till later, especially with the question mark that is Javonte heading into this year. I wouldn't target him, like I said, in fantasy though, because I just think there's so much going on. As for Cortland Sutton, I also really don't know. I mean, he's getting drafted. He's ranked just inside the top 40 at wide receiver. So that's probably 9th round, maybe 10th round that he's going in, Brett. And yes, he's the number one wide, but is he going to finish the number one wide? Because he's got a new quarterback here in Bo Nix. So that's a new thing of well, will he go to other targets there, like a Josh Reynolds or even a Troy Franklin who's just coming in, go to the guy that he's used to. But a lot of the things I'll say on this is for those top guys, the Javantes, the Cortland Suttons of the world, if they have a couple good weeks, I'd ship them out the door in Dynasty, Brett. I think the value will be at near its highest if those guys get a couple good weeks in there because they're just the lead guys in both their rooms at running back and wide receiver. And some people may say, oh, well, Greg Dulcich, I dropped him yesterday in my other Dynasty leagues. They say, oh, well, he's had a couple good days of training camp and he could be solid. Just add him to the list of wide receivers and running backs and how many guys do we have to go through. And that'll tell you, yeah, it's not that great of a spot.
I think that I don't want to call it a hatred because it's not really a hatred. My dislike of Sean Payton really goes back to Gate. I think that the way that it was handled, the way that Payton sort of just was able to brush it off and, he was only suspended for 1 year. That sort of, to me, was the kicker. But we move on from Bounty. As far as Denver goes this year, I think that from the fantasy standpoint, I'm probably staying away from everyone, if being honest with you. I just think, to get on train the sinking ship, though, is not very smart. So Bo Nix, to me, doesn't have any redraft value at all. I think that the only way you're looking at him is if you have, a late first, second in a dynasty rookie draft, and you're taking him based off the value there. As far as Javonte goes, probably a back half of the, ninth round even, and so that's sort of where I'm looking at him. But I think that, you have some of those other names there that we discounted like way back when, like Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard, Jordan Addison's there, Devin Singletary's there, Najee's there. Like those are all the guys that are ranked right around him, Cortland Sutton for that matter. Like I think I would probably take those other guys just with the sort of unknown. Watch Bo Nix, he's going to go throw 50 touchdowns this year now that I'm saying this. But I think that to me, I don't want to get on the headache of Javonte. I think like you, I feel like I'd be waiting every week for him to go off just so I can trade him away to someone else. Obviously, if he slips to a really, really low round, like obviously then it becomes a different story. You have to sort of just take the value, but I don't know that there is going to be that sort of slip. I think somebody else will take him just based on his name alone. And so, yeah, he's sort of there. I'm seeing Audric Estime getting picked in a lot of these rookie drafts. I don't know that it's going to be much of anything. He obviously has to compete with Javonte, obviously has to compete with McLaughlin. I just think that it was a guy who was good in college, and so a lot of people are hyping him up that he's going to be this all-world guy. Listen, it could work out, and we've seen running backs sort of come on the scene. That's sort of how it goes. It's not like they're picked at the top of the draft all the time. Anyway, we historically have not seen them picked at the top of drafts, except for the last couple of years where obviously we had 2 last year picked in the first round. But yeah, even a guy like a Charbonnet, like it hasn't totally worked out yet. And so I'm tempering expectations on the rookie side. Estime, as far as the receivers go, outside of Cortland Sutton, I don't think that Franklin, I don't think that Mims have any sort of redraft value. I think that you'll see people that'll take Mims in like the last round of your league. And that's okay. And I'll let that be. Troy Franklin, we'll see if Bo Nix ends up being the starter. If he does, like Troy Franklin might end up being a consideration for me in redraft. I know he's going to go in a lot of rookie drafts as well. Talent is there, and obviously having Bo Nix there helps as well. So I can see that. And then Greg Dulcich. Listen, you and I had a talk last night about Greg Dulcich as far as your dynasty goes. Like it literally was one day of training camp, and the Broncos beat writers have already proclaimed he had this amazing day at training camp. And the guy, we looked into it further and we were like, oh, wow. Like, Zach, you had already cut him from the team after your draft. And we were like, oh, my God, wow, we didn't see that at all. And then we actually looked at it and it was like he had 2 catches. And so that's sort of why I say, like, you take these things with a grain of salt. Like, I talk about it all the time. Like, we go back couple years where it was Jamar Chase's rookie year, and we talked about like all the drops that he had, and we saw that huge storyline heading into his rookie year where he couldn't catch the ball and so many drops in practice, and he wasn't going to be able to replicate what he did over in college, and that was sort of the storyline heading into the season. And he slipped into round 5, and I grabbed him at round 5 in our redraft league. And, the rest was history. Became a top 3 wide receiver, like instant. And so, you really have to take a lot of these training camp things with a grain of salt. And so Greg Dulcich, he's off the radar for me completely. But, yeah, hey, congrats on the 2 catches, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. And just quickly, last thing on Troy Franklin, because I know he's a popular guy that's getting drafted in rookie drafts right now, Brett. And obviously in that mid-second round in Superflex and probably early second round, in a one quarterback league. And I understand the hype of being with your college quarterback. There's the positives and the negatives to that. The positive is obviously he already has that connection. The negative, though, it doesn't completely take away from what Troy Franklin, some of the problems that he had in college. Because I hate to say it after you talked about Chase, but I mean, drops were a massive thing with Troy Franklin. Massive. And it was very similar to a guy that we saw who also went to Denver, and his problem coming out of college, Jerry Jeudy, was also drops, and his hands were just not where they needed to be as an NFL wide receiver. So I understand that we'll see that, oh, well, Bo, they could do it again in the NFL. I would hold off on it and really make sure that there's no other fantastic value there before drafting them. Because, I mean, Brett, there's a couple guys yesterday that I even got a steal in the draft because people took some guys that just had the hype on them during training camp and OTAs.
Yeah, so I'll jump to that in just a second, but I just want to quickly wrap up here. Like, again, to compare the two, it also helps when your quarterback is Joe Burrow, as compared to Bo Nix. Again, incoming 50 touchdown season now from Bo Nix because I have now put the jinx on him, or the anti-jinx. But he's not Joe Burrow. Like, just he's not. So it helps when you have the elite quarterback there. So yeah, I am with you where a lot of people are hyping him up because, listen, we've seen Chase go with Burrow and that was a thing. I don't know that we'll see that same thing here against the NFL defenses. Zach, next episode, obviously we talked about it at the top of the show. This weekend is our Dynasty Superflex rookie draft. We do a rookie waiver draft. And so anybody who's out there on waivers is also eligible to be drafted. Just let's quickly talk about your one quarterback league and who you came out of the draft with and why you were excited to get them.
Yeah, Brett, I mean, the three guys, there was only 3 rounds and a 12-team one quarterback league. And I ended up in the first round, I traded a couple guys. I ended up getting the 5th pick after some trades. And I ended up getting Brock Bowers at number 5, which in a one quarterback is lower than his expected value. The guy who was picked before Brock Bowers was Xavier Worthy. And we talk about, oh, well, we see the hype. Yeah, there you go. It proves it that a guy like Xavier Worthy, based on maybe it was that catch or just all the media going around, he jumped up over a guy like Brock Bowers, who, I mean, in most years, that would be Bowers going that pick and then Worthy maybe the next one. So I was very excited that Bowers dropped to me. I was going to get either Bowers or Worthy, whoever went, and I was very happy because I rated Bowers above Worthy heading into the draft. The next round was crazy because I ended up getting the 9th and 10th pick in the second round, very deep, and a guy who some people have doubted countless amount of times. Dropped all the way to me, 9th pick in the second round, and that guy's Drake May, who, I mean, if it wasn't for Jaden Daniels, Drake May would be in Washington right now, Brett. Obviously the Heisman season and everything, but the prospect that Drake May was, I mean, just gives me confidence that this guy could end up turning out to be really good. And I got him very, very late. Of course, it's different in a one quarterback, and people see that he's not going to he may not play right away. He may play right away. Well, obviously the question mark there. So he dropped really far. I also got Roman Wilson, who I'm excited about in Pittsburgh, could be the number 2 behind George Pickens. And then lastly, I drafted Jalen McMillan in the 3rd round. Take a shot on him. Going to be the 3rd guy down in Tampa, and also a player who in that Washington offense was very, very successful 2 years ago. Got injured last year, but very successful when Penix was quarterback at Washington.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it led to the cutting of Greg Dulcich with the Brock Bowers edition. to the room with Mark Andrews. And so, yeah, I think you're pretty set for a bit of year there at that end. But to me, I loved your draft because you just basically let the talent fall to you and you sort of just took the best value that came. Obviously, Brock Bowers did fall a spot from where I would have put him. And that was great because it changed the way that your team now is. And then it sort of was the name of the game for the rest of the draft. It was like, let the guys fall. And so you ended up capitalizing on Drake May falling to that spot. You grabbed him, which obviously, like, one quarterback league, it's a little different, but you have Josh Allen there already. You have Kyler there already. So he's joining a competitive room for the spot. But at the same time, I think that if he does hit and it ends up being a really good quarterback, then you made out like a bandit grabbing where you grabbed him. And McMillan and Roman Wilson, I also love them. I think that both of them will end up being really good talents, and so to be able to grab them as the draft, basically, I think you made out pretty well there. As far as the Superflex draft goes this weekend that we have, let's just briefly discuss how we got here. Obviously, you finished towards the bottom. I finished right up towards the top, coming in third place in our league. You and I flip picks. And so I just wanted to quickly break down that trade. As now you are not in the number 4 spot. I am there. Just let's break down the trade and sort of why you did it from your perspective. And then I'll sort of break down why I did it from my perspective.
Yeah, I'll do it quickly. I think obviously my biggest need was getting a quarterback. I had Justin Herbert and Justin Fields as my 2 quarterbacks. And obviously in a super flex, yeah, 2 quarterbacks is basically a must. And 2 starting quarterbacks especially. So I ended up flipping that number 4 pick. I didn't believe I would get a starter out of it, whether it was McCarthy or May. I felt like I would take a proven talent and focus on that. And if it doesn't turn out, then I got another high pick next year, Brett. So there's every which way you can really go on it. I got Rodgers plus Jordan Addison. And I think because of that value that I get, now my team is in a much better spot because I have the quarterback. I added wide receiver depth, which I desperately needed. I think my team is almost there, Brett. I think we're just a couple of pieces away. But it does show you that, like, if there isn't the guy that you need, it is okay to trade down. Some people are like, oh, well, I got to take somebody. Great value up top. No, if it doesn't help your team, then don't do it. It's okay to trade down. And I was comfortable enough to trade down. I have an early second rounder to go off of it now from a different trade too. So I'm excited heading into this year.
Yeah, I think that, you're from your perspective, it was really good because, like you said, you weren't forcing a pick. You weren't forcing yourself on a quarterback that you didn't love. Obviously, Dynasty, like, those are your guys forever till you get rid of them. We don't have a contract league. And so they're yours. And so to be able to go out, you have Garrett Wilson on your team as well, which should be noted. And so to be able to get Aaron Rodgers, get the stack, you pick up Jordan Addison, who was a first-round pick, obviously, last year. And so you basically got a quarterback, which is probably about a second-rounder rating, and then Jordan Addison, who's a first-rounder rating. And so you traded down, quote-unquote. You also pick up a third-round pick, which I think should be pretty good as far as the depth, which you mentioned there. But from my perspective, we obviously have a cut-down day, and so I sort of looked at the opportunity to be able to consolidate my roster by trading away 2 roster players to be able to get 1 roster player. So I picked up Renfro's contract, and I'm just going to say it like that. I picked up the body of Hunter Renfro in the deal, which will end up being one of my cuts as he's a free agent right now. Sort of just as a warm body right now till the cut day comes and he gets cut. But I end up essentially the way I looked at this deal was my team right now. I have Patrick Mahomes. I have Anthony Richardson. Those are my 2 guys, studs at quarterback. Rodgers was my 3rd guy. And basically, I went out and I got Rodgers last year at the trade deadline in case that he returned and I'd have him for this playoff run to basically back up right now what an elite duo. Obviously, Richardson was lost for the season. I was riding on guys like Tommy DeVito, Tyrod Taylor, Zach Wilson. And so I sort of needed a little bit of stability. And in the case that Rodgers came back, I sort of would have had that. It was also an opportunity where I sort of saw a way out on the Jameson Williams roller coaster. And so that was sort of where it led to. But as far as this deal, I was basically sacrificing Rodgers to basically upgrade Addison for one of these elite receivers. That's kind of where my head was at. Obviously, the guys that are at the very top of the draft are better than Addison, I would say. You need a quarterback. And so it sort of just kind of came together very quickly where we both sort of were able to get something that we needed. There was a little bit where I was considering taking a quarterback at 4. Like I said a couple of days ago, it sounds like the owner in front of me is going to take Daniels. Sounds like Caleb has already gotten as well as Marvin, which would leave me at the number 4 spot. And I mean, I got to tell you, I watched the Giants Hard Knocks over the last bunch of weeks to do my research on Neighbors. You're sending me Neighbors highlights on text, and yeah, I'm excited about this guy. I think that this is a guy who could potentially be one of those top LSU receivers that we talk about and can make noise for a long time in this league. And so, listen, I'm excited. I'm obviously like that's not a finalized pick. There still could be some hype on him, and he goes 3rd and whatever. But if it is Neighbors, like I'm thrilled about it. I'm over the moon about it, and so to be able to sacrifice a guy like Rodgers, who obviously love him. We're in New York, and so the Jet connection is definitely strong. To say farewell to a familiar face there was a little tough, but you got to bite the bullet sometimes, especially when you probably can go to the quarterback tree a little bit later to maybe some of those rebuilding teams get one for a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, 100%, Brett.
All right, so that will do it for us and Zach. We are now officially in draft season because I think that from the next couple weeks here, we're going to be covering a lot. Words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darkest below the dawn. We shall rise yet again. Happy draft season, Zach. For Zach Malone, I am Brett Malvin. We will catch you on the next one of the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast.